8 children are dead. The youngest was 3 years old, and the man who killed them was their own father. I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what happened in the Cedar Grove neighborhood of Shreveport, Louisiana, early yesterday morning is the kind of story that shakes you at your core. It is the kind of story that makes you want to hold your kids a little tighter, call your family, and ask yourself how in the world something like this is even possible. And before this video is over, I'm going to give you every verified detail, the timeline, the victims by name, the background of the shooter, the warning signs that were there, and the bigger question this tragedy forces all of us to confront. Because these children deserve more than a headline. They deserve to be remembered. Let's start with the names, because these were not statistics. These were real children with real lives and real futures that were stolen from them in the early hours of a Sunday morning. Jayla Elkins, 3 years old. Shayla Elkins, 5 years old. Braylon Snow, 5 years old. Kayla Pugh, 6 years old. Kadarian Snow, 6 years old. Layla Pugh, 7 years old. Marcaden Pugh, 10 years old. And Soraya Snow, 11 years old. 3 boys and 5 girls, 7 of them siblings, 1 of them a cousin, all of them between the ages of 3 and 11, all of them identified by their mothers to the Caddo Parish Coroner's Office on Sunday, all of them gone. These are their names. Say them, remember them, because they mattered. Now let me take you through exactly what happened, minute by minute, so you understand the full scope of what unfolded in that neighborhood yesterday. It was still dark in Shreveport, Louisiana at around 5 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, April 19, 2026. The Cedar Grove neighborhood, a residential community in the northwestern part of this city of about 180,000 people, was quiet. Most families were asleep. And then 31-year-old Shamar Elkins, a lifelong Shreveport resident, Army veteran, and the father of 7 of the children who would be dead within the hour, made a decision that has no rational explanation, no justification, and no redemption. According to police, Elkins first went to a home on Harrison Street, roughly a block northwest of the main crime scene. There, he shot his wife, the mother of his 7 children, in the face. She survived, but her injuries were described by police as very serious. She was rushed to the hospital where she remained Sunday fighting for her life. Elkins did not stop there. He then drove to a home in the 300 block of West 79th Street, a separate residence where his children were with another woman he was believed to be in a relationship with. He walked in armed with a rifle. What happened next inside that house is something that Shreveport police spokesperson Chris Bordelon said he has never seen in his career. When police arrived at that address just after 6 in the morning following emergency calls about a domestic disturbance, they were met with a crime scene unlike anything they had ever encountered. Inside, 7 of the 8 children were found dead. The 8th child, an 11-year-old girl named Soraya Snow, was found dead on the roof of an adjacent home. She had tried to escape. She had climbed out and made it onto that roof, and she still did not make it. Let that sink in. An 11-year-old girl tried to run, and she still could not get away. A 13-year-old boy managed to jump from the roof and escape. He broke some bones in the fall, but survived. He is alive today because he jumped off a roof. That is what it took to survive what happened in that house yesterday morning. Shreveport police spokesperson Chris Bordelon stood in front of cameras Sunday, and the strain in his voice was unmistakable. "This is an extensive scene unlike anything most of us have ever seen," he said. "I just don't know what to say." Police Chief Wayne Smith stood next to him and said words that he clearly struggled to find. "My heart is just taken aback. I just cannot begin to imagine how such an event could occur." Shreveport Mayor Tom Arsenault, who has served this city through difficult times, called it plainly what it was. "This is a tragic situation," he said at a Sunday news conference. "Maybe the worst tragic situation we've ever had in Shreveport. It rattles the entire city. It affects us all." After the shooting, Elkins fled the scene. He carjacked a vehicle at gunpoint near the homes on West 79th Street and led law enforcement on a high-speed chase out of Shreveport and into neighboring Bossier Parish. The chase ended in the 400 block of Brompton Lane in Bossier City. Officers cornered him. Gunfire was exchanged. Shamar Elkins was shot and pronounced dead at the scene. Louisiana State Police, which handles investigations of officer-involved shootings in that area, confirmed no officers were injured. Whether Elkins died from a police bullet or by his own hand remains under investigation as of this recording. In total, 10 people were shot across 4 crime scenes: 2 homes, the carjacking site, and the final confrontation in Bossier City. 8 children were killed. 2 women were hospitalized with serious and life-threatening injuries. And a community woke up to a Sunday morning they will never forget. Now let's talk about who Shamar Elkins was, because understanding the background here matters enormously. And it also matters because this is not the story of a monster who appeared out of nowhere. This is the story of a man whose trajectory included documented warning signs, a prior violent conviction, a fraying personal life, and a mental health cry posted publicly on social media just 10 days before the worst morning Shreveport has ever seen. Elkins was 31 years old. He was born on January 1, 1995, and had lived in Shreveport his entire life. He served in the Louisiana Army National Guard for 7 years, from August 2013 to August 2020, as a signal support system specialist and a fire support specialist. He was never deployed. He left the service as a private. In 2019, Elkins was arrested on 2 charges: illegal use of a weapon and carrying a firearm on school property. Here is what happened. According to the police report, Elkins said a man in a car had pulled a gun on him, and he reacted by firing 5 rounds at the vehicle as it drove away. But here is the detail that makes that situation far more disturbing. The incident took place less than 300 feet from the fence line at Caddo Magnet High School. Children were playing outside on the school grounds when those shots were fired in the direction of that school. In October 2019, Elkins pleaded guilty to the illegal use of a weapon charge. The second charge was dismissed. He received 18 months of probation. That conviction, a felony firearms conviction, almost certainly made it illegal for Elkins to legally own a firearm under federal law. And yet yesterday morning, he had a rifle. How he obtained it, whether it was legally purchased or acquired, and who may have known he had it, are questions investigators are actively working to answer. Those questions are not just important for this case. They are important for every case that comes after it. Because a man who was legally prohibited from owning a gun walked into a house full of children with one anyway. Then there is the Facebook post. 10 days before the shooting, 10 days, Elkins made a post on his Facebook page suggesting he was experiencing mental health struggles. According to reports, the post indicated he was praying and going through a deeply difficult time. The exact content of that post has not been fully released by investigators, but its existence raises a question that will haunt this case for years. Were there people who saw that post? Was there anyone in his life who reached out? Was there any intervention, from family, from friends, from a pastor, from a mental health professional, in those 10 days between that post and Sunday morning? We do not yet have those answers. What we do know is that the Washington Post reported Elkins was facing divorce proceedings at the time of the shooting. Investigators have not officially confirmed a motive, but the combination of a deteriorating domestic situation, a prior violent conviction, a social media post suggesting mental health distress, and the early morning Sunday timing all point toward a man who had been in crisis for some time, and whose crisis ultimately ended the lives of 8 children who had absolutely nothing to do with whatever adult pain he was carrying. Retired FBI supervisory agent Jason Pack, speaking to Fox News about cases like this, described the behavioral pattern experts call a pathway to violence in familicide cases. He explained that these tragedies rarely happen without warning. They typically begin with a perceived grievance, a breakup, a custody battle, a feeling of humiliation, that the individual fixates on and nurses over time until it consumes everything else. He stops trying to resolve it and starts feeding it, Pack explained. The person builds an internal narrative where they become the victim, and everyone around them is responsible for their suffering. And at some point, that narrative turns violently outward in the most destructive way imaginable. Nothing in that explanation makes what happened in Shreveport acceptable. Nothing excuses it. Nothing explains why 8 children, the oldest just 11 years old, the youngest just 3, had to be the ones to pay the ultimate price for a grown man's unresolved rage toward the adults in his life. The community's response on Sunday was exactly what you would hope for, and exactly what makes moments like this both devastating and oddly affirming about humanity. Neighbors gathered along the crime scene tape on West 79th Street. People brought flowers. Candles were lit. The Pugh family and the Elkins family, relatives of both the victims and the shooter, stood together outside, grieving. Because in a tragedy like this, Everyone loses. Even the family of the man responsible for this woke up Sunday to an incomprehensible reality. City Councilman Grayson Boucher spoke at a news conference with raw honesty. He pointed out that more than 30% of all crimes and murders in Shreveport are domestic in nature. And then he said something stark. He said that in a single morning, one act of domestic violence more than doubled the city's homicide count for the entire year. The deaths of 8 children mark homicides 8 through 15 in Shreveport for 2026. Before Sunday, there had been 7. The Caddo Parish District Attorney's Office released a statement that went beyond legal language. There are no words sufficient to capture the depth of this tragedy, it read. 8 young lives full of promise, innocence, and possibility are gone. Domestic violence is not a private matter. It is a community issue with far-reaching consequences, often affecting the most vulnerable among us, our children. House Speaker Mike Johnson, who has represented Shreveport in Congress for nearly 10 years, called it a heartbreaking tragedy and said his team was in contact with local police. Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry said he and his wife Sharon were heartbroken and praying for everyone affected. Former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, whose own life was forever changed by gun violence, released a statement through her organization focused on gun violence prevention. "This is a devastating act of domestic gun violence," she said. "My heart is breaking for their families, the survivors, and everyone in Shreveport today. All of us should be outraged that we live in a country that routinely subjects our kids to such unimaginable violence." According to CNN, this is the deadliest mass shooting in the United States since January 2024, when a 23-year-old man shot and killed 8 people, most of them his relatives, in a Chicago suburb. The Gun Violence Archive, which defines mass shootings as incidents where 4 or more people are shot, not including the shooter, reports there have been at least 114 mass shootings in the United States so far in 2026 alone. 114. This year is not even 5 months old. And while that number on its own is staggering, what happened in Shreveport on Sunday stands apart, not just because of the number of victims, not just because they were all children, but because every single one of them was killed by someone who was supposed to protect them. That is the piece of this story that cuts deepest. The person they should have been able to run to was the person they were running from. There is also a broader domestic violence reality that Shreveport city officials confronted head-on at Sunday's news conference that deserves to be said clearly and plainly. More than 30% of all murders in Shreveport are domestic in nature. 30%. That number existed before Sunday. It was not a surprise statistic. It was a known reality of the city and of cities across America, where domestic violence consistently accounts for a significant and devastating share of homicide victims every single year. The National Domestic Violence Hotline estimates that on a typical day in the United States, more than 20,000 phone calls are placed to domestic violence hotlines. 20,000 calls in a single day. And the hardest truth about domestic violence is that the children in those homes are almost always the least visible victims, the ones who don't make the call, who don't have a voice in the room, who depend entirely on the adults around them to either protect them or put them at risk. 8 children in Shreveport had no one to protect them at 5 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And now their mothers are in hospital beds. Their families are planning funerals for children who should be starting their weeks at school tomorrow, and an entire city is in shock. There is also this. Counseling and mental health services have been made available to officers who responded to the scene. Even the Shreveport Police Department's own peer support network, a team of colleagues specifically trained to help officers process traumatic events, had never encountered anything like what their fellow officers walked into on West 79th Street Sunday morning. When the people who are professionally trained and mentally prepared for scenes of violence say this one was different, that tells you something about the magnitude of what first responders found in that house. So where does this go from here? Investigators in Shreveport and Bossier City are still processing 4 separate crime scenes. Louisiana State Police are investigating the officer-involved shooting. The 2 women who were shot, Elkins' wife and another woman, remained hospitalized Sunday, their conditions serious. The 13-year-old boy who escaped off the roof is recovering with broken bones but is expected to survive physically. What he carries with him emotionally from that morning is something no child should ever have to carry. The motive has not been officially confirmed. The full picture of what was happening inside Shamar Elkins' life in the days and weeks leading up to Sunday morning is still being assembled by investigators. There will be hearings, there will be reports, there will be community forums, and there will be the same painful national conversation that follows every one of these tragedies, about domestic violence, about access to firearms for people with violent convictions, about mental health intervention, about what it actually looks like to intervene before a man in crisis becomes a man with a rifle. But before all of that, before the policy debates and the political statements and the news cycle moves on, there are 8 children who will never come home. Jayla, Shayla, Braylon, Kayla, Kadarian, Layla, Markaden, Soraya. Between 3 and 11 years old. They had whole lives ahead of them. They had no say in anything that happened to them. They were completely innocent, and they are gone. If this video moved you, if it made you feel the weight of what happened to these children, please hit that like button right now. Not for the algorithm, for them, so that their names and their story reach as many people as possible. Because 8 children deserve to be known and remembered beyond a single news cycle. Drop a comment below. Say their names if you want. Share what you are feeling right now, because this community grieves together, and the voices in this comment section are real people who care. Your words matter more than you know. If you are not subscribed to John Cooper yet, now is the time. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover the stories that matter, the real ones, the hard ones, the heartbreaking ones, the ones the world needs to face honestly and completely. We will keep following this story as investigators release more details, and as Shreveport begins the long, difficult process of healing. And if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence or is in a dangerous home situation, please reach out to the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. It is free, confidential, and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because too many times the warning signs were already there, and too many times no one made the call in time. Rest in peace, Jayla, Shayla, Braylon, Kayla, Kadarian, Layla, Markaden, Soraya. You were 3 years old to 11 years old. You had your whole lives ahead of you. Shreveport will not forget you. America will not forget you. And neither will